Hello, everybody. This is Elizabeth Clare Brewington with Elton Brewington. We are with Brightside Global Trade TV, and our next speaker for this wonderful night. It's beautiful weather outside, and it's a great time for you to take this beautiful book and read a fiction novel. We'll be promoting this book all through our Women History Month. And as you know, we're in the middle of a war with Ukraine bringing everyone into this. But this book has such strong women characters that I think it will really strengthen your confidence and make your faith rise up. So we warmly welcome Dina, and Dina is going to be one of our keynotes, and she's our sponsor for our Women Business Empowerment. This is our third one, and she will be speaking at 4:30. And Ramona Carr will be the moderator, and we have a fabulous panel that will follow, where we'll talk everything about war and women and refugees and strength. And it's going to be a very powerful panel, and I hope you will join us at 4:30 on Thursday, March the 31st. Okay. So over to you,
before
Dina.
Let me just share this with you regarding the book. There's so many great parallels, and in fact, that's why this would make it an amazing read regarding the story of Ukraine and the challenges of family and mothers with children trying to care for the children, and I'm sure that it has a huge plateau for encouragement. You know, and I'm reading it even now, but the parallels seem very, very incredibly difficult. But we need to understand what people that are faced with those conditions might be going through, and perhaps in your read you'll get a revelation regarding that. So,
and actually, Colonel Donna has actually been there during the. So we'll bring her in at the end of your presentation today, and maybe she can add some remarks and tell us about it. I know our book is full of markings and yellow tapes, and Ramona's book has traveled because she shared it with a couple of people. So a lot of people have been reading the book, so it's marvelous. Go ahead, over to you.
Thank you everyone for reading and for listening this evening. I had the pleasure of speaking with Donna after the last meeting, and Reginald, it's my pleasure to meet you, and all I can say is that, your roles are so very important. I had no idea when I started writing the book more than 15 years ago, and addressing a war that took place in Bosnia and Croatia and throughout the Balkans, as Donna said, over a period of years. It wasn't just one war, but I had no idea that when the book came out at the end of October, we would be facing yet another war in Ukraine, and a horrible a loss of life. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the very first chapter, and it should give an idea of what my protagonist is all about. The book is entitled Nermina's Chance, and it begins with a young woman who's in medical school. She's in her second year of medical school in Sarajevo in Bosnia. She's got her whole wonderful life ahead of her, and suddenly war happens, and it just short circuits everything. So I'll begin here. It's chapter 1. It's entitled The Tunnel, Sarajevo, May 1992. The 6 other passengers in the truck are silent, though Nermina feels the shudders of the old woman pressed to her right side and knows she is crying. The little boy Esmer sleeps, his head nested against Nermina's shoulder, his breath and body warming her. At first, the circuitous route made no sense to her. 3 additional trucks in their convoy, their headlights off, crawl behind one another in a hideous steel caterpillar. She hears a shout from the driver in the truck ahead of them, and their own vehicle rolls to a creaky halt. This is the 3rd such stop in as many hours. Their driver, a grim man who could be 25 or 50, had told them that traveling through the mountains on unmarked roads is the only way they'd escape Serbian gunfire. By now, Nermina understands the presence of the white UN vehicles throughout Sarajevo will do little to stave off the siege. Only these men who drive the trucks, Bosnian Muslims and Croats, have a chance of delivering Nermina and the others to the relative safety of the airport tunnel. But the mountain roads have proven treacherous. Rocks cut into the truck's thick tires and have now punctured the oil pan of the truck ahead. She hears the men whispering terse instructions to one another. They'll have to improvise a repair now since they've depleted the only spare parts the caravan carried the last time they'd broken down. Along with the others, Nermina dutifully climbs out of at the driver's order. Her body feels bruised and sore from the truck's constant jerking and lunging. The women take advantage of the stop, though, each squatting in the dark to relieve themselves while one of the men keeps watch. The old woman holds tight to Nermina, clutching at her sweater, while Esmer's small hand grips her own. Exhaust fumes from the truck announce the temporary fix, and they all clamber back inside. Once they are in motion again, Nermina's mind begins to race. Too exhausted to stop their chaotic dance, she sees the images of the past weeks and months flash one after the other. But now, as the convoy comes to yet another stop, her heart pounds harder inside her chest. She looks down at the black mirror of water below them, the narrow bridge that seems unlikely to support the weight of their truck, let alone the others behind them. She thinks of her father, the last time she'd seen him alive. She remembers how he'd forced the cash into her hands, the emptiness in his eyes. They reflected her own weariness, a sorrow that still hasn't reached its full power. He'd pushed her away. Had she been a parent, she would have done the same, but she'd felt only the ruthless cruelty of his action like a slap. The truck crawls across the rickety wooden bridge, and the fear that had overtaken Nermina just moments before now folds into her general state of tense exhaustion. And then as the truck's engine winds into its lowest gear as they climb yet another ridge, a flash of light streaks across the night sky. In the distance, Nermina sees fire leaping across the darkness. Dobrinja, the driver whispers. They've taken Dobrinja. She remembers the house and her room. Her face crumbles. Mersad, she mouths, seeing again the blazing office tower. They took my brothers too. The truck nears a low stone house, and the driver, cigarette dangling from his clenched lips, jumps from the cab. He hisses at his passengers to wait, and then seconds later to gather up their belongings. No other instructions come from what seems a very long time. And then suddenly they are scuttling through a low entryway, the driver aiming a weak stream of light ahead of them from his flashlight. They walk along a set of railway tracks, each, even little Esmer, carrying his own load. No one speaking a word except for the driver's hushed instructions. And then Nermina realizes they're climbing a set of cement stairs. And the stairs deliver them into a bombed out airport that still holds a small terminal. 2 uniformed UN officers hurry through a short corridor that reeks of urine and smoke. She hears a brusque conversation between their driver and the uniformed Americans. A misunderstanding A mistake? Nermina hears the American's terse words her brain is too rattled to decipher. And then she's carried along with the others in another rush of movement. The old woman clutches again at Nermina's arm and torso, and she fights the urge to push her away. Another UN peacekeeper, British this time, motions the group across the tarmac and onto the steps of the plane. With Esmer pressing against her leg and the woman grasping the flesh of Nermina's arm through her sweater, she cares only about getting aboard. She feels the collective tension of all of them now, a great wave of fear and exhaustion, but also a flicker of hope. If she can make this first, most critical leg of the journey, the war will be behind her. Her lips form a grim smile. She sees her father's face, determined, prideful. "I'm getting you out," he'd said. "There's nothing here for you now." She pats her side, feels the thick envelope, which had been even thicker before she boarded the truck. Now they're buckled into their seats and the jet's engines drown out her thoughts. But once they're in the air, the old woman adds timidly, "Do you have people in London?" In the dim light of the cabin, Nermina sees how dark circles spread above the woman's hollow cheeks. She appears to be starving, and she swallows the bitter taste of guilt for the harsh feelings she'd had earlier. She runs her hand softly over Esmer's jet black hair. The child had fallen asleep again as soon as the plane lifted off. She hears her father's instructions once more. First Ancona, then London, then Portland, Oregon, America. No one there, Nermina murmurs. Where then? The woman's expression eases ever so slightly. I'm continuing on to the United States, where I have some friends. She hears the artificial cheerfulness she'd used so often with Esmer in recent weeks. She feels she might laugh, or perhaps she will cry. And you? Nermina asks then, as though she were making polite conversation at a party. London, the old woman says. My niece will meet me in London. Good, says Nermina. She pats the old woman's hand, the skin worn like the hospital linens they'd used those long weeks without laundering, and looks into her wrinkled face. She sees her mother's face then, bruised and beaten. Her father would never grow old. Her parents, they would never grow old. This too, the soldiers have stolen. Thank you.
See, you read it so poignantly, but the reading is very docile, and it does dictate the sadness of the hour and separation of family and the macabre conditions that they're facing. So I can only imagine that squeezing a lifetime into 30 seconds of saying goodbye, and and how a father sends his daughter off and to a better life, although he can't join them. Great choice. I mean, great reading, and it does parallel the stories that I've seen in the news. And so the idea for you is we need to reach audiences with this, because they need to hear the story and hear the symbolism and all of that and what it represents. So
Colonel Donna and Sergeant Reginald, y'all have been in the war. So what do you think about the reading? And have any of you read the book?
Well,
Donna?
Go ahead, Reginald.
I haven't read the book, but I can definitely attest to combat, and I think about my tour in Iraq. It's interesting when you leave loved ones and then you go to an austere area. It's not easy, and it really makes things surreal. Everything that you see on the news and the internet, and you're seeing it up close and personal. When you're seeing the rubble, when you're seeing all of the realities of the fragility of life and how precious it is. And then it's certainly no joke. And, you know, and I'm seeing entire families over in Iraq in constant fear because of what's going on around them, not knowing what's going to happen from one day to the next. So as I heard that chapter being read, that's what it made me think about for that period of time.
Well, I mean, ironically, what you can get from the story and the reading, and I mean, it's a good idea to reflect. And the reading, I mean, there'll be more stories and more real perceptions coming from that what's happening now. But this is what was there something primarily that led you to write this that way? Dina, I mean, is it a story that you felt that must be told, or something that you wanted to make sure that that we never forget?
Well, yes, I appreciate that question. I think that's one of the questions that that Ramona had asked me when we did our interview. I think it's just very difficult to look away from a situation where it's a humanitarian crisis and people are suffering. And I think that in 1992, as Americans, we knew so little about that war. We knew what we saw on TV, and it really wasn't until several years later that I really understood the magnitude of those losses. And yeah, I think to answer in a nutshell, I can't look away from that sort of suffering, and I don't think any of us should.
No, we shouldn't.
Very true, very true.
All right, Colonel Donna.
Yeah, I would agree with what I've heard here today. And another thing that has brought back memories for me, because I didn't get inserted into the Balkan War process, or American for that matter, as part of NATO, until the 1992 to say 1999 era, where it was going back and forth between. It was really a series of separate conflicts. It was not like a continuous battle from 92 to 99. They would have ceasefires and accords, and then a few months later or a year later, then they'd go right back to fighting again, because Yugoslavia had been held together. It's a very multicultural area, right, with different ethnicities, religious backgrounds, attitudes towards everything were vastly different. And Tito had kept it all together when he was the dictator that ruled over Yugoslavia. When he passed away years later, it unraveled, right? All those ethnic tensions and cultural disparities kind of rose to the boiling point. And various parts of Yugoslavia started to break off. Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, they were all going their own way. But in the middle of all that, and here's where it gets so bad, folks, and I'm trying not to get emotional here, but it's unfortunate, but during wartime, whether it's, the Middle East or it's Africa or it's Europe, guess who takes the brunt of it? It's the innocents. It's the children.
Women and children.
It's the women. Right. It's the elderly. Right. And they take the brunt of the war. Right. And that's what we're seeing happen right now in the Ukraine. It happened in Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia. I saw it over and over and over again. It's devastatingly emotional, and it needs to stop. If you're going to have a war of two, countries, let's keep it within the military, right? The military signs up to do that, but let's not attack elementary schools and hospitals and old people in nursing homes. I mean, that has to end. But that's what happened in the Balkans, and that's when I see these, film reels on the Ukraine, I just want to cry. I really do.
Yeah, well, it's hard for me. I've never been in a war, but it is. I cried through your book too. I thought some of the parts of the book was so, even though it was a fiction novel, it was a tough read.
Yes, I know that it's a tough read. I want also to make clear that although it's fiction, the characters are real people. They're composites of real people, and they're composites of people that are living through this war right now.
Yeah.
And it's just it's so difficult to think about people who are just like us.
Yeah.
They've got spouses, they've got siblings, they've got jobs and churches, and and here they are, through no fault of their own. They are suffering. So Donna, I so appreciate your viewpoint. Having being in the military, I think many people we all want peace, and it's valiant to fight for your country. It's not valiant to attack innocent civilians. It just isn't.
Well, it's important now for us to take a position on these things. They're real, it's day to day, it's a parallel. And by reading the book, you bring home a real symbolism, and it's home. You get the pictures. And even while it's difficult not to look at this for too long, because we still have work to do. I mean, and we have to be inspired by our work.
Of course.
We have to be inspired to do something great and beneficial. And so I say that to say, finding a platform that this doesn't stall us, but it compels us and motivates us and moves us forward. So as we're talking here, a collective wisdom comes to hands to say, there's not much, the things that, what does it say? There's what is that? It's the generous prayer. God grant me the courage to change the things that I can. God grant me the wisdom to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. This is real. This is where we are. I mean, what can I make a difference with? What can I not make a difference with? How can I make a difference? And that's a real prayer. So and if I need to get involved with some volunteer resources that help the people who are coming from Ukraine to come here, if I can get on some kind of platforms to help encourage people. Some people just dropped everything they were doing and just went to Ukraine. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I don't have that benefit, but I can, raise funds and monies and volunteer to help support those people who are coming in. And so I encourage us all to do that and give us an understanding. And also just by reading these chapters, and tell everybody that you know about this book. And so we're reading these chapters through this course. And this, believe it or not, is a big deal, because you need to have the pictorial elements, and you need to see the visions of how these things are happening and what war will impact you. And that connection will have a very meaningful impact on your tomorrow. Yeah. And somebody else's tomorrow too. So
I think what we're doing in our own little way is powerful, because you're actually getting people to read a book like this, and understanding, because many people see it on TV, but they don't really get it. And I think you've done such a great job, Dina, with these characters, that you can really get us down to realizing that we have a conscience and a responsibility to these people. And so I think this is a great book, and I think I'm looking forward to Thursday. It's going to be a great discussion.
Tell people about it.
Tell people about it. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
And we look forward to that. And I will reach out this week, and we'll plan for what we're doing on Thursdays, because we've got a really good turnout for that.
Thank you, Dina.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for listening.
So you're watching BrightsideGlobalTrade.org, and the reading will be on our books and authors page, and we'll have links of where you can go to. But very simply, she has a website, DinaGreenberg.com, which is a really great website. And you can get the link, and it's available everywhere on Amazon and everywhere books are sold. This book is a must read during Women History Month.
All right.
We're talking all things war with author Dina Greenberg, and you can subscribe to BrightsideGlobalTrade.org org to be on our show live with us on Zoom, or you can watch on demand.